Hello friends, my name is Carlos Rios. I am the founder of Pixels to Music, and I'm here to help you become a successful, highly skilled, and knowledgeable video game composer. So in this video, I'm going to break down my compositional process for writing my composition that's titled Summer Morning. It is a mix of Joe Hisaishi's style and my own retro-inspired video game music sound. So make sure to stick around until the end of the video, and I will briefly break down for you how I went about creating that Joe Hisaishi sounding chord progression you can hear at the beginning of my track. I like to divide my compositional process in three distinct phases. The first phase I like to call the dream phase, and one of my composition professors actually taught me this in college, and that this is the phase where we simply begin to envision our music. What sounds do we want? What inspiration are we going to draw from? What form should the music have? What emotions will it evoke, right? What's the point of what you're writing? The second phase is the compositional phase, or the composition phase, and this is the production phase, when you're actually making the thing. It's not just a dream, right? But it's a vision that's becoming to take shape. Here's what you get to work. Here's where you write the sheet music, or you record, or you program your music in your DAW. Now the third phase is what I call the mixing and mastering phase. So this is the post-production phase, where you make sure that the audio levels of your tracks are adequate, and you equalize, compress, and further process your work. In other words, this is where you trim the rough edges and you make your music presentable. So the inspiration for this composition was, of course, the sound of Joe Hisaishi, who is, of course, as many of you know, the composer of a lot of the beloved Ghibli films. But also the music was inspired by this awesome pixel art by Kristen, and you can see more of this person's awesome art at this Instagram handle.
Alright, so I just want to highlight a few different things that I did here. So one is for the opening chords that you hear in the track. I'm using this plugin called Koji, and this is the honky tonk piano preset, and I'm adding this delay pedal, the Valhalla Supermassive pedal, to just create this kind of atmospheric sound. The other thing I wanted to highlight, it's Nils K1V marimba sound right here. And I added a little bit of a delay so that it's bouncing back and forth. So this is without the delay, and this is with the delay, right? Just to add a little bit more movement to the music. And the other thing I wanted to highlight real quick was I'm using some sound fonts. So this little flute right here is actually from a Bomberman game. And yeah, this flute sound is from Final Fantasy IV. Quite a different sound.
The opening section is the section most reminiscent of Joe Hisaishi's sound, and I will go over in a little more detail how I crafted this chord progression at the end of the video in the bonus section. We have this triangle sound here, and it's just to add a little more flavor and to add a kind of a meditative feel to the whole opening section. Now when the actual A section starts, you can hear a melody played by Koji's piano that's accompanied by the K1V's marimba sound. Now the B section continues with a marimba accompaniment, and a new melody is taken by a flute. Now for the transition to the second part of the B section, I use a reverse cymbal to lead into the big climatic moment of the track. Now let's talk about the mixing phase. The first thing that I do when starting a mix is making sure that the volume levels of every track are at a good level before I even touch the mixer's faders. This is what's called gain staging.
So gain staging is before you adjust the volume on the faders, you adjust the volume on your instruments themselves. On this plugin, there's not a volume knob on the plugin itself, so what I do is I added a gain knob afterwards, and then I adjusted the volume to the level that I wanted it to be. And then later, when it comes to making more adjustments using the faders, you make very subtle adjustments, and you're a little more precise.
So after I do gain staging, I go through every individual track and I EQ them so that they don't take more of the frequency spectrum that they need.
So what I do is I'll just open an EQ right here and I just cut off all the low frequencies so that they mostly hear the notes on the frequency of the spectrum that I want to hear them in. And you can see here all the different tracks, right? They're all mostly just occupying the part of the frequency spectrum that I want them to occupy.
Now I mostly use compression on drums and parts that have a lot of dynamic contrast. So there are no drums here and most of the music is pretty static. So I really didn't use a whole lot of compression on this track. I only use some of this on the strings to keep the volume levels a little more consistent and to make the instrument pop out a little more. Now at this point I play the track in a loop about 3 to 5 times, and as I'm listening to it, I make tiny adjustments to the volume faders until I'm pleased with the overall sound of every instrument. And I also do a little bit of panning to start opening up the stereo field. And once I'm happy with these parameters, I will then go ahead and automate the tracks to breathe a little more life and, add humanness into the mix. And at the very end, I open an instance of Ozone 9 on the stereo out track. I do some minor EQing and on the whole track and a little bit of stereo imaging to open up the stereo file for the entire track. To open up the stereo field for the entire track a little more. And then I use a maximizer to bring the overall volume levels up so that the music sounds a little bit louder. Hey, you're awesome for sticking around and watching this video so far. Thank you so much. I am going to go ahead and tell you about how I came up with the Ghibli progression, the chord progression. But first, let me tell you of a different way to generate original and fresh chord progressions. I put this simple guide together. It contains 4 strategies that I use to create chord progressions. I made this guide for when I feel stuck and uninspired, or for whenever I feel like I'm using the same chord progressions over and over. This helps me break the mold and come up with new ideas quickly. You can download the guide using the link in the description, and yeah, just go ahead and give it a try, and I think you won't regret downloading it. The goal of the Ghibli progression is to start with ambiguous chords that eventually morph into your main chord progression. All right, so we want to move from an abstract sound and then slowly into a concrete sound, and we want to do this as seamless as possible. This is the process. First, choose 3 random notes, and you're going to build chords using stacks of 4ths and 5ths, and I'm going to pick F, B flat, and G. So we want to have 4 notes in total. But the last note of this first part of the Ghibli progression is special. Okay, consider the first note of your chord progression. In this case, let's say that our main progression is a simple 6-4-1-3 progression, and it's going to be in the key of C major. So the 6 in the key of C major is an A minor chord. The 4th chord of our first part of the Ghibli progression is going to have as its root the note that is exactly a perfect 5th from A. Okay, so the 4th chord of our progression, remember I said it was special? It's going to have as its root the note that is exactly a perfect 5th from A. So in this case, a perfect 5th from A is the note E. So we end up with this sound as the first part of our progression. Now we want to hint at our chord progression, right? Again, our goal is to make a seamless transition from abstraction to a more concrete sound. So we want to hint at our chord progression at some point. So we will actually play the root notes of every chord. But instead of playing the chords themselves, majors and minors, we're just gonna play stacks of fourths and fifths like we did before. So the trick here is to find notes that are within the key of our progression, which in this case is C major. And so our progression again is 6, 4, 1, 3. The root notes for these chords are A, F, C, and E. Okay, this is what the second part of our progression sounds like. Okay, lastly, you simply play the chord progression you choose, right? It would be fine to just play as it is, but if you spice it up by adding extensions on every chord, you will get a bit more of a jazzy and colorful sound. Thank you so much for watching this video. I titled this track Summer Morning, and it is available on all your favorite listening platforms now, and I do realize that it is fall now in the Northern Hemisphere, but in my defense, I did compose this track at the beginning of summer. So, well, that's all I have for today, friends. Until next time.